Democratic Congressman joining us tonight, Brad Sherman of California, a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Also with us, CNN national political correspondent Jessica Yellen and CNN senior congressional correspondent Dana Bash. Welcome all. And Congressman, I want to get straight to this key debating point. And I want to again bring the voice of the president into the conversation, because as you know, the White House is pushing the Senate bill and agrees with most of what's in the Senate bill. The president went up to talk to Wall Street today, and he assured the American people in that speech that they would not be in the bailout business. Let's listen to a little more of the president.
What's not legitimate is to suggest that somehow the legislation being proposed is going to encourage future taxpayer bailouts, as some have claimed. That makes for a good soundbite, but it's not factually accurate.
And again, among those saying it does, especially the Senate bill, does guarantee endless bailouts, the House Republican leader John Boehner, the Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell went to the floor today, and again, he backed off his rhetoric a little bit, but he continues to pose that big question.
Yes, the bill says taxpayers get the money back later, but that sounds awfully familiar. Isn't that exactly what we did with the first bailout fund? A bailout fund Americans were promised would be repaid, but which Democrats are now trying to raid in order to pay for everything else under the sun.
Let me ask you a simple question, Congressman. Who's telling the truth? Is Mitch McConnell right when he says it's endless bailouts, or is the president right when he says that's a good soundbite, but it's not the truth?
Well, regardless of who was right today, tomorrow the president will be right. I just got off the phone with Senator Dodd. I have been working with him. My staff's been working with his staff to deal with Section 210, more specifically 210N10 of the bill. And the senator has agreed to changes that will prevent borrowing by the FDIC that could have been enormous. I don't know whether this is a technical change or a policy change, but in any case, the FDIC will only be able, when it takes over a defunct entity, they'll only be able to borrow 90% of the value of the assets they've taken over, so that they have the liquidity to wind that entity up. And that is considerably different just by taking a couple lines out of Section 210.
Now, you had called that bill and that specific part of the bill TARP on steroids. You believed that the Senate bill would get us down this path again. You're saying now that Senator Dodd has given you his assurance that the language will be changed, and if a Citigroup, a Goldman, somebody's teetering on the edge, the FDIC steps in, it cannot use more taxpayers' money than that firm is worth. So if it had to sell the whole thing the day after tomorrow, the taxpayers would not lose a dime.
Exactly. Now, there will be money collected in advance from Wall Street, but that's Wall Street's money. That's not taxpayer money.
But this doesn't change your criticism of the Federal Reserve's involvement in giving some taxpayer money to these institutions.
Well, there are two other things I'd like to change in the bill. One is to deal with a statute that's been on the books since 1935. That's been used by the Fed to risk up to $2 trillion of our taxpayer money. Now, Bernanke has been good in that he has not taken big risks. He's lent an enormous amount of money, but only on very secure basis. But other chairman of the Fed could use Section 13.3 in the future. You can't blame that, the existence of that section on this bill, but this is a bill that can cut back the bailout powers of the executive branch.
And Dan, let me bring you into the conversation. Based on your reporting, if the change that Congressman Sherman just outlined, that Chairman Dodd has agreed to, that has been one of the key sticking points of the Republicans in the negotiations, saying, Mr. President, you don't get one of our votes, let alone 10, 12, or 15, or maybe even 20 of our votes until you change this. Is that enough?
It's not going to be enough. There are lots of other issues, but that is a big issue. When you heard Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, talking about the fact that there still are taxpayer bailouts in this bill, this whole issue of the FDIC, meaning you and me, the taxpayer, being on the hook for creditors was still a big issue. You feel that that was pretty much taken care of?
I've done my own analysis. I can't speak for McConnell and the Republicans. They may focus on...
But you did agree that was an issue that they agreed with you on, or you agreed with the Republicans on.
I've done my own analysis.
We're not going to get you to say that.
I don't want to be stickler on this, but this is one of the things. Let me just jump in by them. Yeah, I understand your point. You're a Democrat, and you're trying to be a good Democrat, but this is one of the things people don't like about Washington, is that if they're right, why can't we say they're right? Mitch McConnell, in your view, Mitch McConnell, maybe his language, rhetoric might have been hyperbolic, but on the point, he was right, in your view.
Well, in his biggest requested change was to move in the wrong direction. If I read him correctly, he was saying, don't collect the money from Wall Street in advance, but it's okay to...
That's a separate issue.
Right.
That's a separate issue, specifically on the question of taxpayers being on the hook.
I'm not sure that the change he was focused on the most would have exposed taxpayers to even more risk. And the change that Senator Dodd and I have discussed will keep taxpayer money from being put at risk for the failing institution. Now, I talked to Senator Dodd about this Emergency Financial Stabilization Fund, which is not for failing institutions, but could also put taxpayer money at risk.
And let me ask you this then, because based on this, we'll continue the conversation in a minute. But before we take our first break, based on these changes being made tonight, we've spent all of our oxygen this week looking at the Senate bill, which, of course, like health care, would have to be married up to the House bill. If the Senate bill changes in the direction you say it will tonight, will we have to a point where there is a compromise in sight, or will we have, like health care, a Senate bill, a House bill, and then Lord knows what in between, trying to find a compromise?
Well, the health bill was an extraordinary circumstance where you had 60 Democratic senators where it passed, but only 59 Democratic senators when it was time to go to conference, so we didn't go to conference. This bill, I think, should be handled in regular order. The Speaker has been very clear. We go to a conference, we iron out the differences. There are aspects of the House bill that I think are much better than the Senate draft, especially in dealing with that 1935 statute that concerns me, that has been the biggest risk of taxpayer money, albeit it's been treated conservatively by Chairman Bernanke.
Right, we'll continue the conversation in a minute, more on the policy of this and on the politics of this as well. But first, our look behind the numbers. Wall Street gained about 30 points during the president's speech, but investors' reaction was generally ho-hum. The Dow Industrials ended the day about 9 points higher. We're also seeing the trickle-down effects of the big banks' big profits. They've set aside more than $39 billion for their employees' paychecks, a 9% increase from last year, the first quarter of 2009. And get this, they also have money to spend on lobbying, $6.6 million in the first quarter. We'll dig deeper into that number when we come back.
Oh, no.